Time for another statue video, and I've got a broken statue. I've actually got a couple different things I need to fix, including a headless girl statue holding a basket. And so I'm gonna walk through just today some basic steps on how to fix broken statues or repair parts that are kind of chipped away, and just show you a couple tips of some simple, easy things you can do. Hopefully this is helpful. So it is time for statue repair. As we dive into the concrete repair, I've got a couple statues here I want to show some samples of. One is fixing a significant part like a head or an arm. So in this case I got the head of the girl statue. I've got over here a broken tip from this gnome statue, and so it's a real small piece, and I'll show you something a little unique about this part here. And then I've got this here, another girl statue, and this one I broke the head, I cracked it as I was taking it off. Now this one is reinforced with metal inside, so the head actually didn't fall off, but I've got a crack all the way around, and all that's holding it on is the wire or metal that's in there for reinforcement. So I've got to repair here, repair here. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup on here just to make this thing a little bit better before I paint this. And then over here at the raccoon, I've got a sample of one that I had repaired a while back, and then the ear here has been broken off, and I don't have the ear, so I'm going to try to do a little patch job on the ear, a little mold job, just to show you how to repair something when you don't have the piece. So that could be an ear, a small arm, or something else. So we'll kind of walk through this today. Let me take you through some supplies of just some of the basic things that I use. So regarding the supplies you're going to use, first off, the material that you're going to use as the glue or as the material to fix the statue itself. And most of the time I'm actually just using Portland cement. So this is what you make concrete out of. It's kind of the glue that holds the sand and stone and rock chips and all that together. So this is a real fine, you can turn this into kind of a pasty glue, and it'll work real well. So this is what I use for most of my statue repair. Sometimes there is some concrete glue. It comes like in a caulk. There's different ways you can buy it, but I've seen that used. I haven't used that very much because it usually leaves a little bit of a kind of a weird edge, kind of like a glue edge that I like to have more of this that responds better to some of the paint that I use. But you could use that. My dad, he's used that for some broken, like a head fell off of a statue from one of the ones I gave him, and he caulked that thing with that concrete glue, and it's held pretty well. So that's one option you can use also. And then for something small like this, I'm actually typically just using like a super glue or just some sort of glue that will hold this together. I'm not looking for any sort of like serious structural support. I just want something that will hold this together, and then I'll come back through and just do some touch-up paint, and then I'll kind of hide the line, as long as I don't let that glue really build out around that. So for this one, I'm actually just going to use a super glue, get that thing back on there, paint it, and it'll be good as new. So for very small things, you can use a super glue or something like that, but most of the time I'm just using the Portland cement. And with that, I use rubber gloves. It's good for the skin to avoid having that cement on your skin. Some sort of stir stick. I don't make a large quantity of this, so you saw that bag I had, and that was like 94 pounds of it. That's more than a lifetime supply of what I need for small concrete statue repair. But most of the time I just keep a bucket, and I use that stuff for other things. But just a little something to mix it in and kind of mess around with it. You're going to need a little chip brush or a paint brush. I'll tell you about that towards the end. And then I usually use like a grinder, depending on how big the repair is. I might use a drill with an old drill bit, something I can kind of chip away at some of the concrete inside to kind of give it some something to grip to. So I'll tell you about that in a moment. But something you can kind of chip into the concrete. You could even use something more of a fine tool. But whatever you're willing to do, just to kind of knock some of the extra concrete away, so you can have something in there for it to really grab to. So let me walk you through how I do it. We'll start here with the big one, the girl statue head, and let me take you through some steps on how I fix that. So to talk about getting this thing ready to glue, one of the things I want to do is I want to set up to make sure that this thing is, when I have the glue in there, basically it's going to hold together. All the loose parts are cleared off. And then oftentimes with something big and heavy like this that could potentially be grabbed by somebody and pulled out, I don't want this thing just to pop off again, and there is no support in here. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to chip away at the middle here and middle here, so I can get some sort of metal piece in there that'll act as an extra reinforcement. So when I glue this together, there'll be just a little bit extra strength there, and then it'll just fit on there. The other thing I noticed is that this was repaired. This is probably one of my first statues I tried to repair with just normal concrete, and so I can see the big glob of concrete here, and I don't want that. It looks bad. You can see here, just looks like a kind of a thick neck, whereas it's supposed to have this look here of just a, you know, kind of the refined neck part of the statue. So I don't want to throw the statue away. I actually keep this thing out by the road. Kids walk by and they throw little rocks in there or whatever. So I don't mind this thing getting beat up, but I'm gonna just try to clean it up a little bit. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I broke apart that extra piece of concrete that popped off. So now I want to go ahead and get in here and chip away at this so I can kind of have a nugget that goes in and a nugget that goes in here that can have something to add some extra strength in there. So I'm going to go ahead and drill that. Alright, so got a nice spot for this bolt, so when that gets basically glued in there with the cement, and then just gotta make sure it fits right there because I've got the hole in the head. You can see here just a inlet there. So I've cleaned up the old concrete stuff that was in there, got that thing set so I can go ahead and get this ready. So I'll get my Portland cement mixed up and show you that part. But before I do that, let me just show you about a couple of the other statues. I'll kind of show you what I'm gonna do in each of these. So right here with this raccoon, you can see there's a broken ear, and I'm gonna try to just mold with that cement, just kind of mold a rounded part here so the ear doesn't look quite as bad, and see if I can salvage this statue. So that's that one. And then you can see here on this one, the chicken, just a lot of rough edges, so I'm gonna come in here with it and kind of just smooth it out and then paint it, and you should see a big difference. And then regarding the other girl head, this one it's just loose because of the wire, so I'm gonna try to get some of that Portland cement in there and just to kind of give it a little extra strength, and hopefully that'll hold together for years to come. But that's kind of the plan with that. So now, as far as the mixing the cement, getting it ready for the statue, a couple things. I keep a bucket of this Portland cement. It lasts forever, and I just have a lid on it. I typically keep it here in the shed. So I've got my cement here. I've got a bucket of water. I've got where I'm going to mix it in. Just I need a small amount, maybe a quarter of this. My rubber gloves on, and I'm kind of looking for sort of a pasty glue, something that's not runny, but it's not big and globby. I want something that can kind of get into all the cracks of the statue. And so I'm gonna get this stuff made up, let it sit for a minute or two. It dries pretty quick once it goes on stuff, so need to be ready. And then I'm gonna get all the statues out there as I go through. I'll just keep things damp to start with, so I'll get everything kind of wetted down where I'm gonna be gluing, and that kind of helps everything to adhere and stick together. So I'll take about, it's about maybe a quarter filled up. Put in a little water, get it started. Always add a little bit more of either material. And I'm just using a paint stir stick. This might be just a tad bit runny. We'll see. It's going to be pretty close. You can see here just a pasty glob. All right, so I've got my bolt that'll be going back in there in a second, but I want to get this thing all wetted down, so you could spray it down. I'm just going to go ahead and get the head damp, and gonna pour some water over this, tip it over and get that water out of there. Okay, so that's all set. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my Portland cement, kind of just fill in some of those cracks. I don't mind a little bit dripping around. I'm gonna actually spray this thing down when it's all done, get the excess off of there. And that paintbrush will also wipe some of the extra parts, but okay, get my bolt. Where did I put my bolt? There it is. So you can see just sticking out a little bit by the time this thing squishes down. In fact, I'm gonna make sure I get it in all the cracks of this thing too. So kind of like a glue, you're putting it on both sides. Squishing those together. And then I come through my finger and just kind of get the big clumps out. A little bit more on there, and I'm just kind of squeezing it into those gaps. Now, the next thing is, you can see here, it's going to dry a much darker color, so I'm not worried about the color. I just want to make sure that there's no extra little ripples. And so I'm going to kind of make it look as, almost mold it so it looks nice. And like you can see here, there's a little bit of a drip line, so it's okay to get it wet and just kind of spread that around. In the original statue, I know there's some kind of hair that comes down through here. I'm not going to necessarily make a bunch of new hair, but I just want to make sure it looks normal and natural. This is also the same stuff you can use if you have air bubbles. In fact, just from this being a little bit weathered up here on the top, there's a little bit of this roughness, which isn't bad. That's part of the statue look, but I'll go ahead and fill in a couple of those. I don't want to do too much more movement of this. I want it to really be able to harden up. There's not a huge amount of strength in the Portland cement, just a glue, so I want it to not have to move around over and over again. Clean up some of the extra with the water on there. Okay, as far as this ear, I'm just gonna get it dampened up. Just gonna pour a little water over there. Come back here, take my paste. Just build it up a little bit to get a little bit more of a rounded edge versus a broken look. And again, this is not structural at all. This isn't the strongest stuff in the world, but it absorbs the paint nice and pretty easy to work with, kind of like a clay. Might be a little extra runny there. Some thicker stuff in there. All right, it's the next morning. I didn't get a chance to finish these yesterday, so I'm coming back to today to wrap these up, but they're all dry except for the one I just touched up the ear on over here in the raccoon. I noticed there's a little bit of, there's a little bit flat still, so I raised it up a little bit, and you can kind of see, hopefully that helps get that thing looking close to what it was like when it was a good statue as far as that ear. But now what I like to do is, because the grays are different on the old concrete, whether it's been aged for a long time or whether it's just new concrete, there's kind of that whitish color, at least in my area. With the cement, I like to go back and do my little kind of paint slash stain aged antique look. It hides any of the discoloration of the concrete and makes it look pretty much good as new. So if you've watched one of my other videos, you've seen how I do the kind of the final part of the finish, but I'll go ahead and do that again here. And I've got two different things. I've got my black paint and I've got my white paint. The black, I go and I put in a little thing like this, fill it up pretty heavily with water. I would say it's like 1 part paint to 2/3 water. It's real runny, just to kind of get some color soaked into the concrete. That's why I say stain. It's paint, but it kind of stains. It kind of absorbs in there really good, and it's just to kind of add a base. And then the white, I come back and do a dry brush technique at the end after it's all dry. Just lightly brush it through. You'll see in a moment. One thing I'm going to do a little different, I want to experiment with is, I've typically used just a straight black, but I like the look sometimes of doing more of a kind of a medium gray and having that as the base coat. It gives it a little bit different look. So I'm going to kind of do a comparison, show you what the black looks like, and show you what the kind of gray looks like on the finished product, so you kind of see a couple things there. Yeah, let's see how this thing goes. Oh, and also I did super glue the little tip on here, so that's a different process. I used a kind of craft paints for this, so I got to go back and find which red I used, and I'll touch this up. But just super glue. There's other things you can use too, but just something that'll kind of hold that thing in place. I think this got dropped, and that's how that thing broke originally. But all right, let's dive in. All right, so what I've got here is I've got my black, and then I also have the gray, and this is basically I just took some black and some of the white and just mixed it together in here. Go ahead and water the black down. I've got it partially watered down, but so that's about a 50-50 mix. I think I'll just go with that. Okay, so I got about a 50-50 mix in here, and I'm gonna get that all mixed in real good. Again, this is just giving it a base coat. It doesn't need to be deep black. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then one of the things I like to do before I start my statue painting is I like to just go ahead and spray them down or dip them in water. So I'll dip them in water, and in this case, because of how big they are, I'll just stick the hose and spray them off, get them just moist. That helps the paint to really absorb into it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, I'm just getting it to absorb in there. Okay, so as you can see, very watered down, and it's just gonna soak into that, give it some darker color, so when I come back through, it'll kind of dry and absorb into there, and I'll show you that what that looks like in a moment when it's dry. All right, I moved my location. I didn't want the paint dropping on my grass out in the middle of the grass, so over here in the side yard. So I'm gonna go ahead and wet down. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do kind of half of these with the black base, half of these with the gray base, and we'll kind of finish these off and do a comparison. So I'll just kind of work through these. You can kind of watch how it works, and then hopefully that inspires you. Wetting it down first. Alright, so it's been a few hours later. The base coat of the black or the gray is now dry. I've got several of the statues behind me here that I need to go ahead and dry brush now. And so basically the technique is you get your white paint, you just need a little bit on there, and you're going to have a little bit on your brush, and you kind of get most of it off of there, and you're going to just basically just you're going to just lightly brush it different directions, and you're going to see it adds kind of a frosting, just barely hits some of the different features of the statue. So let me show you. And typically, if you're starting out, you might have to redo this a couple times. Go very light on the paint. You can always add stuff. If you put too much on, then you got to go back and redo your base coat. So I always make sure I got plenty of it off of there until I make sure my technique is good. And then I'm just gonna go different directions. You want to make sure that you're going multiple directions so that it's picking up the dusting in different ways. You can see it kind of highlights the different features on there. And I'm doing a little aggressive with my brushing, but I have hardly anything on there, so go back over the same areas and just, if I do too much of it, it ends up looking like kind of like this Narnia white frosted look. So got to kind of figure out the amount of color you want. But it kind of gives it that aged stone look, like it's been out in the weather for a while. Okay, and now for the gray chicken, same thing. Go back and forth, different directions. Alright, next let's go ahead and dry brush the raccoon. You can see the repaired ear. I don't know if you can tell which one was repaired, if you remember from that, but I think overall it turned out pretty well. And by the time this thing is done, I think we're going to not be able to tell much of a difference. So this one might be even a little bit heavy on the amount of paint on there, but I'll keep going. Let's see what it looks like afterwards. So as you can see here, whether it's the gray base or the black base, they both have kind of a cool look. The repair job itself, it's pretty much invisible now, and as long as you're not really cranking hard on that head or dropping the statues, they should be fine for many years to come. And just putting a little bit of that cement in there, kind of gluing it back together, it absorbs the paint just like the concrete does and creates kind of a uniform look. So it's kind of a great way to repair your concrete statues if something's broken, or if you need to repair, like whether it's bubbles or nicks or things along the way. A lot of times with just nicks and stuff like that, you could use like a black permanent marker or just some black paint, kind of touch that up. But some of the bigger things, this technique can work pretty well to kind of mold or fix those things. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you have questions, throw those in the chat. Thanks again for your support, and have a good life.